Once upon a time, there lived a lovely princess named Snow White. Her vain and wicked stepmother, the queen, feared that one day Snow White's beauty would surpass her own. So she dressed Snow White in rags and forced her to work as a scullery maid to keep her away from the prince who had fallen in love with her from afar. One day, the magic mirror informed the queen that Snow White was now the fairest in the land. Enraged, the queen ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. The huntsman couldn't bring himself to harm Snow White, so he let her go, telling her to flee into the woods and never return. Lost and frightened, Snow White stumbled upon a tiny cottage deep in the forest. Inside, she found 7 little beds and 7 little chairs, and she made herself at home. Unknown to her, the cottage belonged to 7 dwarfs who worked in a nearby mine. When the dwarfs returned home, they were surprised to find Snow White. After hearing her story, they welcomed her warmly and allowed her to stay with them. Snow White promised to take care of their house and cook their meals if they would let her stay. Meanwhile, the queen, believing Snow White dead, asked her magic mirror once more who the fairest in the land was. To her horror, the mirror replied that Snow White was still alive and was the fairest of all. Determined to eliminate her rival once and for all, the queen disguised herself and used her dark magic to create a poisoned apple. Disguised as an old peddler woman, the queen visited the cottage and offered Snow White the poisoned apple. The naive princess took a bite and fell into a deep sleep, destined to sleep for eternity unless she was awakened by true love's kiss. Heartbroken, the dwarfs placed Snow White in a glass coffin and mourned her. Time passed, and one day, a prince who had heard of Snow White's beauty came to the forest. He saw Snow White in her glass coffin and instantly fell in love with her. Overcome with emotion, he kissed her gently. Miraculously, Snow White awoke from her deep slumber. The prince and Snow White were married in a grand ceremony, and Snow White forgave her stepmother for the harm she had caused. The queen, however, met her own end at the wedding when she was forced to dance in red-hot iron shoes until she fell down dead. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, ruling the kingdom with kindness and wisdom. And that is the tale of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, a classic fairy tale of love, jealousy, and redemption.